Hello friends I made this for. My name is Lauren and I am a tarot reader, astrology fan, witch, art ritual facilitator, all good things. And this is a video about Mercury and Gemini. If you've never been here before, hi, hello, how are you? I talk about astrology by using tarot to help us understand it a little bit more. And if you have been here before, hi, I love you so much. You're my baby. Anyway, let's get into it. So I'm recording this on the 12th, but putting it out later in the week. So by the time this comes out, Mercury has already entered Gemini. But to help me talk about Mercury and Gemini today, I have 3 decks using 2 cards from 3 decks to illustrate the vision. First, we got the Morgan Greer Tarot, the Mary L Tarot, 2nd edition, and then lastly, we have the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. Because we're talking about Mercury and Gemini, I'm going to be using the Magician and the Lovers to illustrate how we can kind of dive into this planetary shift a little differently. So feel free to pull out your own tarot cards and specifically pulling out your Lovers and the Magician to kind of see what sort of magic is hiding within your version of these beautiful cards. As a tarot reader, I want to just also give the disclaimer. If you disagree with what I say, it's totally fine. A lot of what I come with is from learning from books, teachers, this, that, and the third, and have kind of put it through my own brain to share to you. But everyone's interpretation of the tarot and astrology might differ in different ways. But with that said, like, comment, subscribe if you find this interesting. Make sure to check out the links below if you're interested in supporting me, including on Patreon. And let's just dive right in. Before I get started though, I do want to give a shout out to Brady Waller, whose amazing books I use to help refresh my brain about astrology from time to time. I have other books that I love to use too, but Brady is a sweet human being. I got to illustrate their book, Planetary Pause. This is not the final version. This is like a misprint. So I like to use this misprint, even though, it just has extra pages, but everything is the final thing. So this is what my art looks like. And today we're talking about Mercury. This is what I drew for Mercury for Brady's book. I got to illustrate for them. And so to start, let's actually use this illustration. So this is my illustration for Mercury. Mercury is a planet that is all about how we understand information, how we transmute that information, how we receive information. It has a lot to do with how we process the world around us. So that's kind of what I tried to illustrate with this illustration, capturing that vibe of how we give and receive and kind of have this constant understanding of information. So Mercury, how we talk, how we hear. Yeah? I'm going to start with the Morgan Greer Tarot, and we're going to start with the Magician. I have other videos about Mercury and the Magician. I'll try and link one of those at the end of this video, just so you can have it as a reference. But this is going to be our first interpretation of the Magician, and this is a very classic depiction of this card. We see the Magician with all their tools on the table in front of them. We see the infinity symbol above their head, and we see them holding almost like a staff, a rod, acting as this almost representation of being a conduit, so being a channel, having all the resources in front of you and channeling that information. Now, what's really interesting about this astrological shift is that Mercury is actually the ruler of both Virgo and Gemini. So for Mercury to be in Gemini, this is something that some folks might refer to as like Mercury's happy place. Mercury is joyful in Gemini. Mercury is super stoked to be in Gemini. So this is a placement that some might refer to being at home in this sign. And let's look at the Lovers through this beautiful card, this beautiful representation. So this is a very classic representation that's very similar to the Smith-Waite deck that I have referenced in past videos. And that is because we have almost like the Garden of Eden, maybe Adam and Eve, a very religious iconography kind of being brought here. We see these beautiful lilies, calla lilies specifically. I have calla lilies at my wedding in my bouquet. Any hoozle. So what this conversation between these two lovers really identifies for us is this information going back and forth. Gemini tries, Gemini communicates, Gemini adapts. Gemini is fluid and it's mutable energy. So this is a very, sometimes the word influenceable comes up, but really what it comes down to is how are the people around us reflections for who we are, or something like that. So when we're looking at Mercury in Gemini, the lovers, I want you to think for yourself for a second. What comes up here? What comes up for you, I mean? Before I project my own thoughts and opinions, maybe journal, pause the video and journal what you personally are channeling when you see these two things together. Did you pause it? If you didn't, that's fine. But what I'm hoping to illustrate here is that there's a connection to me of being a channel and being a mirror. We see the magician with all the tools at their disposal being a conduit of information, of God's energy, quote unquote. Use that as you will. Universe, God, Allah, spirit, creator, whatever words really work for you. Maybe not Allah, because people who are Muslim are not, don't use tarot. So, just saying, it's whatever vocabulary, vernacular, you know? This might give us really romantic vibes, and I'm not gonna lie, a lot of these cards, interpretation of the lovers, is very romantic. But what else can we get into here? We can see duality, perhaps, the masc and the femme, if we're kind of in that state of mind, the connection or the unification of both of these things. These two people are embracing, so there is that connection, that interpretation. Very much, how do we channel our relationships? How do we channel the magic of our relationships is something that I said around the full moon, or something like that, and I think that that's still very prevalent here. How can we deeply communicate our vision, our needs, our desires to our deepest and closest folks? And how can we disseminate that information on a bigger scale. So those are some things that I feel like can come up for us around Mercury and Gemini. It's a very potent energy with Mercury be. Y'all, I can't stop yawning. It's like in every video. My bad. How can we really look at the mirrors of our lives as being information for us to better understand and create harmony? This is harmony within our relationships, yeah? So that's one aspect. Let's look at the Mary L Tarot and see if there's anything different coming up for us in these exact same cards. I'm really fun. So let's start with the Magician again. So this one's really interesting, and I actually want to bring this up as like compare and contrast. We see this sacred geometry right here. We also see the Magician walking on water. I also want to note that every magician I'm going to share today, it's right there. That thing. On this one too. We see the Magician floating on water, almost like Jesus, perhaps, but probably more to give the sense of otherworldliness. Mercury, if we're going off of the, pantheon of Zeus, the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology, like this ancient myth connected to this character. Mercury was the one who was disseminating the information, right? Like sharing the info, sharing the stories, like who's doing what, you figure it out through talking with this person. So this, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not doing a good job. If you want to really know the goods, Brady Waller, buy the book. They're actually really, really informational, and Brady is a genius. So anyway, but what I kind of get out of this is like the river of Styx. And so for me, what comes up is like the in-between, the liminal spaces. And that's very Mercury like energy, being in the liminal spaces, being in the in-between, being in the transition. So this is kind of both life and death. We see maybe perhaps the sun, we see some dead trees, but we see water. So there's the how can we flow? How can we channel? This is more of a how do we bring the physical to life? And this is more how do we communicate the in-between spaces in the liminal void. So what are we creating? And what are we communicating? Sorry, what are we communicating here? So the Lovers in this deck is really beautiful. We see the old and the young. We see the masculine, feminine, sure. We see a little clitoris up here. Wow. When I talk about Gemini and the Lovers for this year, I actually did use this deck because I think it's really good. And we see dark and light. So this duality of humanity, we see both ends of the spectrum, and just the physical appearance. And we see this very tender embrace. And so one thing that we can see that perhaps we're trying to navigate in this time of Mercury and Gemini is how to better embrace the world around us as the mirror that it is, even when things don't look the same as us, when things are different, when things might be quote unquote opposing. How can we embrace those things with a little bit more nuance, a little bit more softness, and a little bit more ease? Gemini to me is really, it's a big communicator and a big sign about how do we like really get through the nitty-gritty of the world. Is it through creating barriers, or is it how Gemini would want it, by breaking them down and kind of finding union with the unusual, or just every aspect of life? So not necessarily being closed off, but being mutable, fluid. All right, like how do we embody that energy in a way that is like dope? How do we embrace variety as the spice of life, and see these mirrors around us as teachers that we can, I don't want to say take from, because that sounds a little colonizery, but how can we embrace with less boundaries? Boundaries around what things have to look like, or boundaries around what it should look like, things like that. So this embrace between the lovers, and also seeing this card for the Magician, brings up for me, how can we see our relationships as esoteric teachers and communicate what we learn from each other in a way that really nourishes our relationships to the deepest, deepest level. But let's finish up this deep dive with the Lonely Dreamer Tarot. So in this one, we see the Magician, like so. And again, what do we notice? The same thing overhead in all three of these, that infinity symbol. And what we are kind of seeing is almost like, well, it's eyes facing forward and almost heart open. So allowing for spaciousness again, allowing for the liminal spaces, allowing for the channel, allowing ourselves to receive and give, receive and give, receive and give, right? And what are we receiving and giving? The magic of holding each other, the magic of holding hands. To just put it plainly, the magic of being present and walking this journey in union with all of us. With Mercury and Gemini, this might be a great time to really pay attention to how you communicate to others, but also how you receive information from others. Is there something else we can do as we're walking through this very dark world and this dark time, quite frankly, while holding each other a little bit more? How can we be open to that? How can we navigate the liminal spaces with embracing duality, and not so much in this binary way, but in no longer being us versus them, but you and me are extensions of each other? And lastly, how do we channel the tools that allow us to be powerful in a way that allows us to share that information softer? I hope this was helpful for you as we go through this astrological time of Gemini and Mercury. Mercury being at home in its sign of Gemini, where it does a lot more pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling, and really moving through with this ease of how does the world operate differently, and how, for me, and how can I learn to operate a little bit differently by observing those relationships and the power that they bring for me. With that said, links as always down below. I have a Patreon where I do monthly art ritual circles. Our next art ritual is happening on the 20th. coming up this month, and it's going to be really, really good. If you're interested in joining, it's only $2 a month on Patreon. I highly recommend. It's going to be a great way to kind of channel some really beautiful magic. And of course, I have some workshops coming up with Art as Ritual, where I highly recommend you check out Loving Little Me, because that is going to be an amazing workshop connecting with our inner child. Bring your tarot decks, your cards, your magical tools, your art materials, and let's get connected to our magical little one. But anyway, yeah, check out the videos that have popped up around me. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this with a friend if you found this interesting. Also, let me know if you've ever heard of Brady Waller. Have you ever bought any of their work? Taken a workshop? Highly recommend if you have not. They do amazing work. They haven't put out any new workshops lately, but I gotta get more sleep, y'all. But anyway, I'm done. Bye-bye. I love you. Bye-bye.